Welcome to the Bitcoin Playbook, where we discuss proven strategies for using Bitcoin in your business. I'm your host, Josh Friedeman, and joining me for another roundup episode are TREY Sellers and John Gordon. Today, we discuss Stake and Shake accepting Bitcoin payments, more Bitcoin corporate adoption, and the first Bitcoin treasury state. We're going to get to our conversation right after this. Business owners, unlock the benefits Bitcoin has to offer your business with the Bitcoin for Business Quick Start Guide. This 27-page guide highlights the 6 ways you can grow your business with Bitcoin. Check it out in the show notes. Gentlemen, welcome back to another Roundup episode. We have a handful of things to talk about this week, including the Bitcoin for Corporations event that happened last week, as well as Stake and Shake accepting Bitcoin as payment. TREY, I know that you were at the Bitcoin for Corporations event. Could you give us a roundup of what was happening there? I was watching from afar, but was not there in person.
Yeah, I was. It's my 3rd year in a row of going. They've only done it 3 years, so kind of cool that I've been able to attend each year. And actually, I attended the virtual one that they did. I think it was in 2021. It must have been, where there's that like famous dialogue between Saylor and Ross Stevens. And I need to go back and look at that because I remember it just being like very impactful. I need to rewatch that. Every year the conference has grown, but this year it grew quite a bit substantially over the previous year, where it was a little bit more incremental in the other 2 years there. And I think it's just because the majority of the story around MicroStrategy and strategy and the way that they've pivoted their business into this high-powered capital markets engine for acquiring Bitcoin, that all played out in the last 9-10 months or so since the previous year's conference. And so there was a lot more energy in the room. It was bigger. It was probably more like 300 or 400 people who were attending just for the Bitcoin side of things. And then, this is embedded into a conference that MicroStrategy has done for 20 plus years, I think, which was all focused on their legacy business around business intelligence and AI and that kind of thing. Those were obviously big themes, and those were a little bit interwoven into the Bitcoin theme. But you can, like, for me and my experience in attending this conference every year, you're seeing this consistent shift into the focus being on Bitcoin and the business side of what strategy does being kind of a secondary thing, which is what we see in the way that Saylor and the management team, the executive management team, focuses on their business and how they address the market. Couple key things that I thought were really interesting. First, Saylor was talking and he mentioned, they're talking through the different financial instruments that they've launched, which Strike and Strive are 2 new preferred equity type instruments that kind of mimic fixed income, but they're brand new structures. They've never been done before. And the novelty of that was actually developed using ChatGPT or some combination of the AI models that are out there. And I found that really fascinating that you've got new financial innovation that is being engineered in concert with these AI technologies that are out there. And so I think we're going to continue to see that probably opened up a lot of people's minds to, hey, what can these tools help us to do when we're trying to forage into a new landscape of what a Bitcoin treasury company means. There's a lot of talk about the different metrics that they're using, BTC yield, BTC torque, like all of these things that were identified in the earnings call a couple of weeks ago. And then there was a lot of talk from Saylor and from Phong Le, their CEO, about just the difference or the evolution that they've gone through in talking to investors, talking to the market, shifting away from a phone call that everybody, that nobody was tuning into, less than 40 people, to 150,000 people tuning into their earnings call the other day, which lasted 2 hours and had like intense presentations where both the executive team and Saylor are like diving into all the intricacies of how they see what strategy's been doing, how they see the Bitcoin market, all of these different metrics that they're developing. And so it was just all very interesting to see their evolution in how they talk about Bitcoin, how they talk about their strategy and the company and raising funds and the capital markets and all of that. And then how they approach social media and using that as a really empowering tool for communicating directly with the retail investor side and shaping the narrative around what they're doing. So all of that stuff plays together with the way that they think about the business and think about communicating the value proposition of what they're creating. And it was just really cool to see all of that come together in a communication across all of these different sessions. And then the last thing I'll say is that there's a lot of MicroStrategy or strategy investors there, just the retail guys who just love the story and wanted to go to the conference and be able to have access to Saylor and his team and all of the other investors. The True North guys were there. They hosted their own like mini conference within the conference that was going on and had their own events. I had dinner with a few of those at one night. And so it's just, there's a lot of energy in the conference itself. And it's one of my favorites every year.
Yeah. I've really been impressed by Phong Lee across the last, probably even just 4 months or so. I feel like even at the Q4 call, it didn't feel like he was in his element as much, but the most recent earnings call, then his speech at MIT a couple months ago, I've really enjoyed listening to him. It's a tough act to follow Michael Saylor because he's one of the more engaging voices on Bitcoin, probably ever. Now, there's a lot of other people that could really give him a run for his money, but Phong Lee's really stepped into his role. It's been really cool to see. John, I don't know if you were paying too much attention to the event from afar, but do you have any reflections or thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's just really interesting to reflect. As you said, Trey, the numbers seem to really be increasing, whether it's on the earnings calls or now in person at the conference, and attention to what strategy is doing. We're coming up on the 5-year anniversary of their first Bitcoin buy here in August. And now with well over 500,000 Bitcoin and continuing to add, it seems like almost every Monday to their stack, as the cost basis now from that first buy at 10K, now is almost $70,000 per Bitcoin. But I think it just shows, their conviction. They made the playbook open for any other corporate to follow. And while I think we thought we would see more of that in 2021, as we saw Tesla get in and a couple others, it was very slow. Whereas now it feels like almost every other day we're hearing different announcements of companies that want to become a Bitcoin treasury company because they see the massive growth that Strategy's had over the last few years and that other of the next entrants have had as well. So, I think it remains to be seen. And most of these companies still have an operating business to go with it. But as Strategy continues to compile so much Bitcoin, I think some of Hal Finney's prophecy early on of having Bitcoin banks in a way will be, there's a lot of different products you can offer when you have that much Bitcoin too, may come to fruition as well. So, just watching from afar, but looking forward to interacting with more folks here at the Bitcoin conference coming up. So I'm sure that was a good prelude for you, Trey, and good to connect with different folks in the industry. I'm curious to hear too if there's kind of any other industries that seem like they're popping up, or it could be it's just really a diverse set of companies that are realizing, hey, this is what we should be doing. If we can't get past the hurdle rate of 65% growth or Bitcoin's growth year over year, we should probably just be buying Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm. Well, that was certainly the main message, I think, that the strategy team is trying to get across to the market. I don't think we're seeing a whole lot of diversity in who's actually adopting it, though, right? There's certainly been a lot of talk and new development around Bitcoin treasury companies and what that means, and essentially people trying to arb the capital markets to acquire Bitcoin by selling basically premium into the market to acquire an undervalued asset. But all of that seems to be driven from Bitcoiners creating these kind of new structures here. It's not really being driven very much by legacy businesses that are just saying, hey, we're going to bring Bitcoin into our strategy and adopt it as a treasury asset and accept it as payment, except we have seen Steak and Shake do that or make an announcement that they're going to start accepting Bitcoin as payment for their food and whatever at all of their restaurants. I think they serve over 100 million people annually is what they've reported. There's close to 400 restaurants across the country. It's mostly in the Southeast here. So I'm planning on going here this Friday to go check it out and see if they actually will accept my Bitcoin for payment for a steak and a shake, or a burger and fries or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that is certainly like a divergence from the trend that's been popping up, which is just these people creating essentially hedge funds as a way to capitalize on the financing mechanisms available in traditional capital markets to funnel money into Bitcoin and create some shareholder value just from that particular strategy.
So all of these corporations, they have a bunch of different ways to get more Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And for a lot of private companies, smaller businesses, they can't do that. So it's really cool to see someone like Steak and Shake sort of leading the way, showing what you can do in order to get more Bitcoin besides going to the capital markets. When I started Business Bitcoinization, which is now the Bitcoin Playbook, my whole thought was like, I want to be talking to those people who are beginning to use it in their businesses. And it sort of developed in a way that, I guess, in retrospect was obvious, but I do like to see more people accepting Bitcoin. And I hope Steak and Shake has great success with this, and other businesses start seeing this as an opportunity for them to grow. So I'm the same way. I already have plans for May 16th when this episode is going live and when they start accepting Bitcoin, but I want to get out there as soon as I can to support what they're doing.
Hopefully it's successful and they actually get kind of a tailwind behind that movement, because if it kind of dies on the vine after a few weeks, then, there's not much market incentive for other people to follow in their footsteps.
Yeah. I don't know if I can eat enough Steak and Shake to keep them going, but hopefully between all of those combining forces.
I'm going to give it a shot.
Yeah.
They did say they were switching to beef tallow, so if they really follow through with that, and get more Bitcoiners who are into health on board.
I think they already have
frying and seed oils. So yeah, if that's confirmed, as well as the Bitcoin, I think we can, hope to see more Bitcoiners and others going there and learning. And I think it'll be interesting to see how they roll this out from an operational perspective and how they integrate with their point of sale, how they're educating employees, having helped different businesses integrate a Bitcoin strategy and accepting Bitcoin payments, which, as you mentioned, Josh, and really is the most efficient way of getting Bitcoin on the balance sheet. You're getting that direct, from your customers in a peer-to-peer way, and not only lowering your transaction fees from the 3% that credit cards will take, but even having faster settlement, especially with the Lightning Network. I saw some rumors they might be using NCR, which had some potential plays a few years ago, but they clearly have some tools at scale already for point of sale. So if they've been working on this for a while and really have a solid implementation, I think, could lead the way for other bigger businesses that have a big footprint and need to get their staff and cashiers and others on board with understanding how to accept the Bitcoin payment. And absolutely, Trey, that I think, we want to see this not die on the vine. I think Bitcoin really as a peer-to-peer cash and moving into the medium of exchange phase is super important. And we've seen many examples in other places that have built out more, and I've seen it personally too, and even a place like Bali, for example, that had a lot of Bitcoin activity 10 years ago, then had more of a shutdown from the government. And when I was there in the beginning of 2022, there's almost basically no businesses accepting Bitcoin, both from a pressure perspective and then from a lack of tourism and lack of people actually spending Bitcoin. So I think having maybe other incentives, maybe they'll introduce some kind of rewards, maybe they'll help point people towards apps where people can get Bitcoin and spend in Bitcoin, whether that's Strike or Cash App or where else that people can get their hands on some sats to spend. It's, I think, a great example and something we'll want to follow closely.
Yeah, I really think that the Bitcoin acceptance for payments, all of that kind of thing, has to be a pull mechanism from the business owners who recognize the value of holding Bitcoin, and there's almost an altruistic play that has to happen here with these business owners. It feels like, in just seeing Steak and Shake's social media posts, that somebody there in key positions is a hardcore Bitcoiner, and they're pushing this through because they love Bitcoin and they want the business to adopt Bitcoin, which makes me think that it may not die on the vine, at least from their standpoint. They'll just continue to keep it alive long enough for the market to catch up with them. And you need that. You can't just go into these businesses and say, accept Bitcoin, please. And they have no understanding of why they should do that. And then, yeah, maybe you'll have some success because you're just kind of like twisting people's arms to some degree, and they're feeling bad, like, oh, I guess I can try it, whatever. What's the big risk? But they don't actually have any, like, they don't ever place any value in what it's helping to develop and the reason that they would want to have it on their balance sheet or be accepting of it. And so there's no like internal incentive to continue that program. But if you have somebody who's integrated into the business at levels that are key for decision making and strategy, then that actually can work. So if Steak and Shake does this, maybe it receives some success and some fanfare from Bitcoiners going there and whatever. Maybe it doesn't. But if they're able to just continue it, the market will catch up, and then you'll see a competitor to them, adopt it as somebody new gets orange pilled who's in Chick-fil-A or something like that, right? So we'll see what happens. But I'm cautiously optimistic that the people running Steak and Shake actually get Bitcoin and actually are true Bitcoiners. That is going to have a lot more staying power when it comes to integrating it into the business for accepting payments and that kind of thing.
There's some things that can be a drag on the business, if you're too early, but I feel like this is one of those things. It doesn't sound like their approach is going to require them to do too much extra. And as an example of this, my dad works at a school, and they started doing online education in 2007, 2008. It's way earlier than most people did. And they started leaning into it, and they obviously improved over the years. But when 2020 came and all these schools were, thrown into it and had no idea what Zoom was, et cetera, it was something the school was already used to. And so it wasn't necessarily the biggest part of their education at the very beginning. But then over time, it just kind of grew and grew as part of who the institution was. And when 2020 came, when everyone had to go to digital, they were ready. And so to your point, Trey, I feel like Steak and Shake hopping in now, being prepared for when people are more ready to pay is a great thing. They'll probably iterate along the way. They'll probably improve their processes, but definitely I'm very excited to see how some of these things develop. And once again, I'd love to see more companies seeing their success and saying, hey, let's go and start doing this for ourselves as well.
And we were talking about it a few weeks ago, that the marketing power that Bitcoiners and the ecosystem has behind businesses who just really embrace it is very powerful. So, if they're able to leverage that from a marketing standpoint and really lean into it, it could actually drive, new good business growth at the bottom line. Even if it's just incremental, every little bit counts when you're talking about a business that's probably operating on lower margins and, there's a lot of competition. It's difficult to be profitable. Well, this sets you apart from your competition and gives certain people some, intransigent minority of people who otherwise, like, I haven't been to a Steak and Shake in years. I used to go every once in a while when I was a kid, but it's been years, and I'm planning on going on Friday because they are adopting Bitcoin and I care about that. So, it's not that much of a polarizing issue anymore. Like, nobody's going to be banging down their doors or trying to burn down a Steak and Shake for them, trying to light the planet on fire because they're accepting Bitcoin or something like that. That all of that has gone by the wayside. Now there's pretty much nothing but upside as long as you lean into it, understand the narratives that people care about, and really embrace it a little bit more deeply than just at a surface level.
Today's episode of Business Bitcoinization is proudly brought to you by Velis Commerce, where the future of business technology meets Bitcoin. As we journey through the era of Bitcoin and its transformational impact on businesses, there's one name that stands out: Velis Commerce. Whether you're looking to build a cutting-edge website, a seamless mobile app, or custom software, Velis is your go-to team. They've been diving deep into the world of Bitcoin since 2014, making them one of the most experienced groups for integrating Bitcoin and Lightning payments into a variety of digital platforms. But here's what truly sets them apart. Velis Commerce doesn't just build. They bring a wealth of knowledge to ensure your project's success from day one. Their team understands the nuances of Bitcoin, ensuring that your business stays ahead of the curve. And for all business Bitcoinization listeners out there, Velis Commerce is offering a free consultation to kickstart your project the right way. So if you're ready to future-proof your business in the coming age of hyper-Bitcoinization, head over to veliscommerce.com or reach out on Twitter at veliscommerce. Let's make sure your business thrives in the Bitcoin era. If you were hit by a bus right now, could your family access your Bitcoin? When's the right time to stop hodling and use Bitcoin to impact your family's lives, not just yours? What if Bitcoin doesn't reach the value you expect, or it takes longer to reach that value? Do you have a plan? Do you have the proper trust structure to avoid probate, maintain your privacy, and minimize taxes? Do you want to avoid taxes to stack more sats or leverage your stack without selling? Should you add Bitcoin to your business's balance sheet? Are you truly confident in your self-custody setup? If any of those questions made you stop and think, you probably realize that simply buying and holding Bitcoin is not a complete financial plan. That's where Strong Wealth comes in. Orange-pilled advisors blending traditional financial planning with deep Bitcoin expertise, giving you the best of both worlds, so you can sleep peacefully knowing you're making the right moves for your family no matter what happens. Schedule a free call at strongwealth.net. That's strongwealth.net. Strong Wealth, wealth management for Bitcoiners by Bitcoiners. So, John, I'd be interested to hear from you, since you work a lot more with businesses looking to do more of what Steak and Shake's doing, adopting Bitcoin into their business processes. What have you seen recently? Have there been any wins that you've seen, or maybe just additional insight that you could provide to any business owner listening to this right now who might be thinking to themselves, I can't do what Strategy's doing, what MetaPlanet's doing, but I'd like to do something with Bitcoin. Do you have any insight for them?
Yeah, absolutely. I like to take my clients through an exercise where we look at all the different tools that are available for you to accept Bitcoin and Lightning Network payments, everything from custodial solutions over to non-custodial and running your own node. And it's important to know that there's many options and that can meet you where you're at and also fit in line with how your business is operating. Are you accepting payments in person? Then you need point of sale. Are you more e-commerce and you need a Shopify plugin? Well, there's solutions for that. Or are you more around invoicing your clients and you're a contractor and you're a freelancer and running your own business and you want to be paid in Bitcoin? There's a lot of flexibility that you can offer in deals too, whether it's a discount or what I like to do, it's a fiat premium if you pay me in fiat instead of paying me in Bitcoin, and showing, hey, I prefer to be paid in Bitcoin. So I've seen and helped different medical offices, doctors, dentists, e-commerce practices, recently an architect who's launching a new business, Huddle House, Brian Jones. And his really taking a Bitcoin first approach to architecture, but also just accepting payments. And one of the companies I've partnered with that's based out of Austin is called Zaprite, and they make it really easy for businesses to accept Bitcoin and Lightning payments alongside their fiat rails, whether that's Stripe or Square, or you want to hook up with any other Lightning or Bitcoin solution. As simple as getting spun up with your own Blue Wallet and typing in your XPub and confirming there. And it saves that extra step or issue of saying, hey, send me a Bitcoin address. It's all right there and really easy. And the customer at the end of the day can decide what they want to pay with. And so it takes a few touch points even to see, oh, this business is accepting Bitcoin, for that customer to realize, oh, maybe I should learn a little more about this, or maybe they're offering a discount and there's another incentive for me to want to pay in Bitcoin. So I think slowly, we're definitely getting there. But I think that the diversity of businesses I'm seeing that are wanting to accept Bitcoin is growing, and it comes down to, as you mentioned, the merchant. And I really subscribe to Parker Lewis's theory, pay me in Bitcoin, that it will start with the merchants and the business owners who are in control there, and seeing the value of also setting up a redundant payment rail. Right, there might be a whole host of reasons why you might lose access to your bank accounts, depending on where you're at or what kind of business you're running, in which jurisdictions where you're trying to operate. And as businesses really grow internationally as well, it's often a lot easier just to pay in Bitcoin. You don't have to deal with wire transfers. You have better speed. So I think overall business owners are are really waking up to this, not only in the U.S. but certainly globally. But it's big to see a bigger U.S. player make a push. And as you mentioned, Trey, you might not have gone to a Steak and Shake, and now you're going to go, and that's another customer. There's another X follower. They're seeing some virality there from just the post itself and activity, which is what brands want to do and staying relevant. So I think overall, it's important to not be intimidated if someone listening to your show who's interested in more smaller, medium sized businesses that are accepting Bitcoin, and just taking that first step. And there's so many great resources out there that you can read and learn more, or people or companies that you can engage with from more of a consulting side to really hold your hand through it, depending on what kind of setup you need for your business.
One other great tool, and I interviewed one of the co-founders probably about 2 months ago, is Orchestra. That's spelled with a Q instead of a CH. But Stephen Cole, I talked with him on the show. And if you're not quite sure whether or not you want to set up the infrastructure to accept Bitcoin payments, what Orchestra allows you to do is basically DCA for every sale. You can decide what percentage of that you want to go into Bitcoin. There's some other things you can do as well, but that's an easy way to stack Bitcoin in your day-to-day operations without having to worry about that education piece. But at the same time, the more you educate your customers on Bitcoin, make it a normal thing, the more they're likely to pay. We also have a couple things that have happened in the last couple of weeks. There have been some new companies that have announced that they want to become Bitcoin holding companies. There's a lot of things we haven't learned about those yet. Vivek Ramaswamy's Strive, they're going to be trading as ASST. And then I think just yesterday, as of this recording, David Bailey announced Nakamoto, and they are going to be trading as KDLY, at least for now. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on those. I feel like it's just more of the same. It is cool to see, especially someone like Vivek's name out there, just once again, because it will raise attention in the public, and people will say, hey, if someone like Vivek's taking it seriously, maybe I should. Or they might say, Vivek's taking it seriously, I'm going to stay away from it. But either way, it gets out there into the ether a little bit more. You guys have any thoughts on either of those developments or what that might mean? Or do you feel like it's just kind of more of the same that we've seen across the last couple of months?
It's great that there's new activity around all of this, but I stand by my characterization of these as just people setting up hedge funds to take advantage of capital market financing to funnel money into Bitcoin and give people a little bit of extra leveraged Bitcoin exposure. So that's all great, right? It's kind of a speculative attack in its own right. And, I think I mentioned this the last time we had this roundup, is you just have to be very careful when you're buying these securities that you understand what the premium looks like that you're paying for that asset, because over the longer period of time, if you're holding on to this and that premium compresses down toward the NAV of Bitcoin that they actually are exposed to, you're going to be actually losing ground relative to just buying Bitcoin directly. And so, it really is a premium to NAV play. And as long as that premium holds steady or it expands, you'll be outperforming Bitcoin. But as soon as it starts compressing, which I expect to happen as you have more and more of these types of facilities out there that are trying to take advantage of this arbitrage opportunity, it's going to have downward pressure on that premium to NAV. And so you just got to make sure that you're being aware of what you're paying for these things. But the market seems to like them. I mean, both of these new securities just skyrocketed in the announcement in the first few days of doing that, even though they have no actual Bitcoin on their balance sheet yet. So that premium is effectively infinite at this point in time. Just be careful.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to see, with Nakamoto yesterday, and we'll see how this shakes out. With Kindly MD is actually a concierge medical practice out in Utah. There's a public company. Seemed like they were pretty involved in the cannabis space as well, just from their website. So I don't know, exactly how that came about, but clearly there's some targeting that can be done where there are many, thousands of public companies that are trading out there that are running a business, and for whatever reason, the right connections are made, and you can kind of have almost like a SPAC into, a Bitcoin treasury company. So I think, there's certainly some big numbers being thrown around and firepower there. And we'll see, remains to be seen that we have a lot of announcements, but when companies actually start stacking Bitcoin, and then I think more and more we're going to see the importance of proof of reserves coming into play for all Bitcoin companies, and especially public Bitcoin companies, and how that Bitcoin's being held, how it's being custodied is really important. And especially, as you mentioned, TREY is just an individual investor that now has access to these tickers. That can be a differentiating factor, just as there were other differentiating factors with the 11 Bitcoin ETFs that we saw, whether it's Fidelity holding their own keys, or Bitwise making investments in open source, Bitcoin development. So there's other, considerations as you, I think, get into more of these equities. But at the end of the day, they're another layer of counterparty risk. And as an individual, and even as a business, even if you don't have access to those capital markets, you can still, self-custody and stack sats with profits that you're making, depending on where we're at in the cycle, you could also see some better upside, right? Where we've seen recent price action now back over 100K, where we had a bit of a dip, and we'll see where we go now that almost 95% of Bitcoin has been issued already. So maybe the halving cycles have less of an impact. Maybe we have, we just have more, sustained buyers too from a lot of these instruments that are being announced. And as they buy, they're obviously going to want to come in and buy any dips that come into play.
So last time we talked about a state potentially beginning to adopt their own Bitcoin strategy, kind of use it as a reserve asset. That was Arizona, and it did not pass from the governor. However, now New Hampshire has finally become the first Bitcoin state. Any thoughts there? I'd be interested to get those from you. I'm just reflecting a little bit on my own state of Mississippi. I think right now we're probably going to be much later in the game as far as accepting Bitcoin goes. I think it's interesting. Generally, this has been a Republican-pushed issue in recent days, for better or for worse. But I think in Mississippi, we have a Democratic state representative who was at least leading the most recent charge. And I think she's relatively new, and it didn't get very far at all. So I don't have high hopes for Mississippi when it comes to Bitcoin adoption at the state level. New Hampshire, it sounds like potentially they'll be able to pay taxes and things like that in Bitcoin, which I don't think that I would probably ever do unless that was, I only had Bitcoin. But do you have any thoughts on the New Hampshire bill? Or maybe, I know, TREY, last time you said you think Georgia could be a state that moves relatively quickly on this, or at least you had high hopes. Any thoughts on New Hampshire or your own state accepting Bitcoin in the near future?
Well, it's definitely precedent setting that you have a state in the U.S. Acting in kind of a sovereign way to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve. I think there's been a lot in the works across various states and a lot of policy work being done from some Bitcoiners who are wanting, these types of things to happen. And we finally saw one come across the finish line. So it's small in terms of dollar terms and the impact, right? It's a small state. It's a small potential allocation, I think 5%. But it's much larger implications for pulling back breaking through the glass ceiling, so to speak, on establishing a government agency at the state level, and somebody going first. Because once you go first, typically there's like a second fast follower here. So is it going to be Georgia? I don't know. Like I said, I know that there's some talks in the works there, and some people who are pushing for that issue. But Georgia is a much bigger state that has a much bigger, statewide GDP or economy there, and politics are a little bit different here than they are in New Hampshire, which is a little bit more libertarian leaning rather than Republican or whatever. So, remains to be seen who is the fast follower, but the glass ceiling has been broken, and that's the most important piece of this.
Yep.
Yeah, I think Texas has made some progress, since our last roundup as well, passing the House, and they wrap up the session here in early June. So there's, I think, some good momentum for potentially getting something passed and signed in Texas, which would be much bigger from a dollar term and just impact already within the Bitcoin economy. Or from a mining perspective, there's a lot of interaction between policymakers and business, particularly around demand response and in the energy market. So I think it would make sense to where there's already been a lot of education done around the benefits Bitcoin can bring to the economy. And I would hope to see my home state of Illinois make a little bit more progress. The pension and otherwise fiscal situation is very challenging in the state. So I think any state that is a fast follower or wants to adopt it next will again see more of that upside. So it's fitting that we had the Free State adopt it next, and we had a lot of Bitcoiners in there making some great speeches and talking, really getting in there with their legislators. So I think that type of grassroots is going to be necessary across different states. And it is nice to see that kind of sovereignty taking place and knowing, hey, we can move faster than even the federal level as they're working through their own executive order and buying Bitcoin in budget neutral ways. That's kind of still happening in the background here. That's a massive would be then a massive boon, I think, for states to come in next to model whatever buying and limits that they have, whether it can be any digital asset, but it has to be over, $500 billion. And so that kind of rules out anything else in play, even if they don't want to specify Bitcoin, right? Whatever kind of needs to happen from a actual policy writing perspective, there's ways to do it that it's very clear, hey, the intent is to buy Bitcoin and not anything else.
Yeah, and this is a legislative win as opposed to an executive order like has happened in the federal government. So it has more staying power, I think, on the state level. And it just further reinforces that the political risks to Bitcoin have largely been neutered. It was a serious point of FUD for a very long time. The government's going to ban Bitcoin, and now they're not. They're not banning it. They're buying it. They're paving the way for broad-based adoption. And as the United States leads, typically the rest of the world follows. So you're going to continue to see, sovereign nation states, perhaps smaller political entities across the world adopt Bitcoin in a very similar way. It'll have its own local flavor to it, of course, but it certainly is going in the exact opposite direction of the people who are hating on Bitcoin because the government is going to ban it.
Well, let's go ahead and wrap it there for this week. There's definitely a lot of stuff underway, and it'll be exciting to see where it goes. John, could you share with people where they can go to find out more about what you're doing, maybe team up with you in the future? And then after that, Trey, if you'd share as well.
Yeah, you can learn more about my work at satoshihealth.com and the different businesses that I'm helping integrate a Bitcoin strategy. Also the Bitcoin Yogi on X and Nostr, and you can find some more of my content and writings over there.
Yeah, and you can follow me on X at @TS_hodl. And then check out my newsletter on financial independence and Bitcoin. It's firebtc.substack.com. The most recent issue that came out last week is about expected value analysis and how that can play into decision making, not only for your finances but in life. It's should be a good read. So go check it out and make sure you subscribe to it.
Excellent, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks. Talk soon.
Well, friends, it's a wrap. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Bitcoin Playbook. If you want to reach out to either me, Trey, or John, you can find those links down in the show notes. And be sure to go and get yourself some Steak and Shake this week. And when you do, pay in Bitcoin. As always, keep building, keep growing, and until next time, keep living and leading well.